Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sisters. A warm welcome and thank you for joining us once again on our Let's Talk About It series, our webinar series. And we started this as Methodist Women in Britain in September last year because we wanted to talk about those issues that we don't normally talk about within church. We tend to go into church and we talk about what the scripture or what the lectionary has asked us to speak about, and we're inspired. But there are topics that happen in our day-to-day life that don't get airplay within our church communities, and this is what this series is all about. We've pulled back on curtains. We've pulled back the curtain on many topics. We've spoken about mental health. We've spoken about domestic abuse. We've spoken about menopause. Today, we're going to talk about something that is in everyone's wallet. We hope it is. We're going to talk about money. This is in keeping with our themes and our objectives as Methodist women in Britain, where we continue to seek justice and also spread the word of God. But in doing that, we are speaking up for those topics, for those areas, and for those sisters and brothers around us who are in the fringes, who are going through experiences that we can assist, or we're going through those experiences. We're going to talk about social justice, money, and poverty. Our title is Pennies and Principles. We're living through a time where the cost of living and the crushing weight of debt are not just headlines. They are lived realities for many of our sisters and neighbors. The word tells us that God has said, the silver is mine and the gold is mine. And that's what God has declared. So if it all belongs to him, how do we manage it? And more importantly, how do we support those who feel they have none? Now, before we go ahead and I pass on to someone who speaks about money and the effects and people who are affected by the having or not having the lack of money, I'm just going to put in a phrase. This is a shame-free zone. Whatever we're going to discuss now, if you feel it affects you, there is a number on one of our screens who you can call. You can call Christians Against Poverty. I'll introduce you to Sally shortly, and she is representing Christians Against Poverty today. Please do not sit quietly and feel and experience situations, and especially things that we talk about within our webinars, without reaching out for help. So there is a help number that you can reach out to. So to help us navigate, I'm absolutely privileged to introduce our guest today, Sally Bosingham. Sally is the head of church and supporter engagement at Christians Against Poverty. And Sally is one of us. She is a local preacher within the Methodist Church who bridges a world of high-level finance with a deep pastoral Methodist heart. She spends her life talking about money with everyone from clergy to families in crisis. Sally, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours, or the screen rather is yours.
Thank you so much, Olive, and really lovely to see you all and to be with you as sisters in Christ, as part of Methodist Women in Britain. I was saying to Olive, I've not been to any of the Methodist Women in Britain meetings or connected, but I am a Methodist woman, and I am in Britain. I was born and brought up in the Methodist Church. Both my parents are ordained Methodist ministers, so if you've been around in Methodist circles, your ears might have pricked up at the surname Bossingham. My parents are both ordained Methodist ministers, and I I'm a local preacher. And often when I go around preaching, I'm quite fortunate because people will say to me, "Oh, it's really nice to have a young preacher, a lovely young preacher." And then I tell them that I started preaching when I was 17. So I've actually been preaching for nearly 25 years. It'll be 25 years next year that I've been a preacher. But if you cut me open, you will find that Methodist core within me. I was nurtured in the faith within MAYC, and with a real passion and God's heart for social justice and social change. So I feel like that I'm here this evening, yes, as a representative of Christians Against Poverty. I'm really blessed to work for a charity which is now in its 30th year of providing free debt advice through the church to people in the UK who are some of the most vulnerable to debt and poverty in the UK. But I'm also here as a fellow Methodist. I'm here as someone who was blessed and fortunate enough to work for Christian Aid and to travel and visit parts of the world where people are living on a very different scale of poverty altogether. I'm also someone who worked for a number of years at the Diocese of Leicester as their stewardship advisor, which is basically somebody who helps churches speak to congregation members about giving, about tithing more generally, or giving generally, but also specifically about giving to the church and helping the church to talk about the needs of the church. And there's very few things more uncomfortable, perhaps you can imagine, than trying to help an Anglican treasurer talk to congregation members about the financial needs of the church. Money, sex, and politics, the things that British people don't feel comfortable talking about. And in my experience, Christians in Anglican or Methodist traditions feel even less comfortable talking about it than the general population. But we are going to talk about it this evening. And we're going to sort of weave through three different places. We're going to start by looking at theology. I want to share with you a little bit of Christians Against Poverty's theology around poverty in the Bible and what poverty means in a theological way, how that translates into a more personal theology around money and finance. We're then going to have a little look at what poverty and debt, particularly what indebtedness looks like in the UK at the moment, how that affects people, and sitting that really on top of that theological basis that we've looked at. And then we're going to have a little look at what the church is doing. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the ministry of Christians Against Poverty and how the church is stepping in and supporting those who are in some of the most vulnerable situations in the UK. And then we'll have a little bit of a time to chat, and you can ask some questions, and I may or may not have great answers for you. You may have answers for each other, or you may just want to express your opinion or your own sort of sense of theology or ideas around money and finance. But I'm looking forward to spending this time with you, and I hope that there's something here for you that feeds you, that challenges you. And always when we gather together, and especially as a preacher, praying that God will speak to us, that God will direct us and challenge us through what we're hearing this evening. I'm going to just share my screen now. So let's talk about faith and finance, and let's talk about poverty. I think the first thing to say, and it's kind of an obvious point, but poverty, any kind of poverty, is not God's plan for God's world in any sense. Now, whether we believe in a sort of a literal creation narrative, Adam and Eve, or whether we don't. I don't think it really matters. What that story tells us is that we were created to live in harmony with God, in harmony with each other, in harmony with ourselves, and in harmony with the world. That there was a sense of balance and order within the world that God created and the world that God intended us to live in. And when we look in all sorts of, we don't have to look very far at all to see the ways in which we no longer live in that world that God created. And poverty is one example of how that has broken out into our world. But poverty, when we hear about and we talk about it being described, we think about it really often as a financial thing. But poverty is much, much more than financial. And I know that when I've traveled, when I've visited places in Sierra Leone, in Malawi, in Colombia, and I've sat with people who are utterly impoverished, what they almost never say to me is, I don't have any money. What they say is, I feel disempowered. I can't change anything. I feel isolated. I feel that I don't have a voice. I feel ashamed that I can't feed my children. I feel scared of what the future holds for my children. Very rarely does the topic of money actually crop up in that very pure form, because poverty spills out and affects everything around it. And the way that we understand that theologically is about a set of broken relationships. Poverty arises from broken relationships, from the way that God intended us to live together. So first of all, poverty exists when our relationship is broken from God. We experience a kind of a spiritual poverty. Poverty is experienced in our brokenness of relationship with each other. And we see that expressed in selfish behavior, in thinking of ourselves before others, in taking decisions that push others down and push others away and elevate ourselves, in the conflict that we see. We see poverty expressed in our own broken relationships with ourselves, the kind of damaging self-worth and self-esteem that we see. But we also see poverty expressed in our relationship with the world. And we see that in the unjust systems and structures that govern our world, that make it so easy for some to have so much and others to have less. Theologically, these broken relationships are all part of the fall, as it's known, all part of the way in which we have fallen away from God's plan for our world and the way that we're supposed to live with each other. And as a consequence of that, poverty comes into the world. And poverty expresses itself in all these ways, in our spirituality, in our social relationships, in our self-esteem, and in the way the world works. And when people describe poverty, that's what we're seeing. But that is not the end of the story, because we know that Jesus came as a response to our brokenness and our broken relationships. Jesus came as a response to the way in which we were alienated from each other. Jesus came because of the way in which our self-worth and our self-esteem had been damaged. Jesus came because of the way in which some had much and some had little, and some were being abused by others. And Jesus came to restore those broken relationships. Now, I could point to all kinds of different stories in the Gospels, and I'm sure you could too. Perhaps that's something we can come to later if we want to. Beautiful stories of the Gospel where people's self-esteem is restored by an encounter with Jesus, or where reconciliation is reached, or where Jesus speaks truth to power to restore and redeem unjust structures and systems, and the way in which Jesus points people to God. Jesus comes to restore the broken relationships that cause poverty. Jesus comes to change everything. And this, my friends, is the kingdom of God. We see the kingdom of God when those relationships are restored. And where relationships are restored, there is no poverty, there is no financial poverty, there is no spiritual poverty, there is no relational poverty. And the church is called now, after Jesus' ascension, to heal those broken relationships. Christians are called to live out the kingdom of God and to restore those broken relationships. And this is the kingdom of God. And we see it and we touch it and we taste it when Christians live faithfully in following Jesus. So, how does this affect us personally? Well, the first thing to say is our personal finances are then just not a matter of the money that we have in our wallet. What we do with our money and the theology by which we live our lives in terms of our finance is deeply connected to the web of relationships that we experience in our lives. The relationship we have with God, the way in which we understand God as our Redeemer, as our provider. It's caught up in the relationships that we have with each other, the way in which we are seeing others as equal to ourselves, treating others as we would wish to be treated. It's in our sense of self-esteem. And it's in the way that we see our world and the care of our world. This is often what's described as stewardship in Christian theology, that idea that we are here not as consumers in the world, simply to take what we can and to use it, but we are actually here to care for it on behalf of God. We are God's carers for God's creation. And so our sense of those relationships and our own discipleship journey is one of those things that will very deeply impact the way in which we relate to money and finance. And so on a personal level, I've kind of divided this up into two spaces. What I would call a sort of a personal finance approach to our money versus a stewardship approach to money. The personal finance approach you can kind of characterize by, this is mine and I'll do what I want with it. Essentially, we think of our money and our possessions as, this is mine and I'll do what I want with it. Now, I say this with no hint of arrogance. This is the way that I view my money and my possessions a good chunk of the time. This is what Olive was saying, of no shame. We are all on a discipleship walk with Jesus. We are all on a journey. And for some, money is a harder part of that discipleship journey than others. But if we have that sense of, this is mine and I'll do what I want with it, there are some characteristics that come along with that kind of attitude. A sense of entitlement. I remember preaching a sermon on the rich young man. You'll probably all be aware of that story, the young man who comes to Jesus and says, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? And Jesus says, give away everything you own and follow me. And the young man just can't do it. And he goes away sad, and Jesus goes away sad because he has so many possessions. He simply can't give away what he has. And I remember preaching a sermon about Christian Aid, or on Christian Aid Sunday, and a man coming up to me afterwards, after the service, and saying, I see what you're saying, but I've worked really hard for everything I have. Well, he sort of said, I know I have a lot, but I've worked very hard for everything I have. And in that moment, I felt a similar sense of sadness, because there was an underlying sense of the entitlement of, I've worked for what I have, therefore it's mine, therefore I'll do what I want with it. And with that entitlement, whether you have a lot or whether you have a little, introduces that attitude then of shame. So if I don't have, there's something wrong with what I'm doing. I'm not doing enough. I'm not worth enough. That sense of self and self-value comes from what you have or what you don't have. And that introduces the idea of shame. Not just that you feel embarrassed, but that there is something shameful about you because of what you don't have. There's a sense of self-reliance that I've done this myself, but also something of a house of sand. What happens if that falls down? The kind of fear that might be around some of that finance. And therefore, for safety, there's that idea of accumulation. What can I build up to make myself feel safe? Now, that's not me criticizing a good policy of personal savings or having a pension. This is more about an attitude of the heart, about how we perceive what we have and the sense of value or identity that we might get from our money and our possessions. A stewardship approach looks quite different, and it starts from a different premise. If you've gone to an Anglican church, you'll have heard the prayer that they say when they do the collection of all things come from you, and of your own do we give you. And it's that sense of bedding down our money, wealth, and possessions in everything I have is a gift of God. Everything I have comes from God. Therefore, when I give, when I spend, I am a steward of the resources that God's given. That's what the Bible teaches as an approach for Christians. And therefore, we live not in a sense of entitlement, but actually living out of grace. We are grateful recipients of the things that God has given us, be those large or small. We have our identity, therefore, not in what we are able to acquire or buy or make or save, but as children of God. And that takes away some of the sense of shame, or that idea of shame about money and finance and what we have and what we don't have. We have a sense of reliance then on God, but also on the Christian community that might be around us. And it inspires us to do more for others, to share the things that we have. And we're living out of generosity, out of abundance, actually seeing the things that God has given us. If people ask me, what's a kind of a first step to developing on that stewardship journey, the very first thing I would always say to somebody is developing our thanksgiving. You know, when do we have a time every day where we just give thanks to God for the things in our lives, even if they're simple things? Do we have an attitude of thanksgiving about our lives and the things around us as a sort of a step one? So it's just a reflection, and maybe we can send these round afterwards. When you look at these words, and again, zero shame, some of the ones in the left apply to me more often than I would like to say. But what are the words that kind of are with you when you think about money and finance and personal finance? And where might God be leading you into that, more of that stewardship heart for yourself, for your good, and development of your discipleship journey? Because it's not really about money, actually. And one of the examples I give around this is the comparison between the rich young man and Zacchaeus. Both of them wealthy. Zacchaeus obviously is a tax collector, deeply hated because he spent his time working for the Roman occupiers and creaming off the top of the taxes that were going from Jews to the Romans. but he was wealthy from stealing. But Jesus doesn't ask him to give everything he owns away. He just asks him to pay back, and to pay back more than he's stolen or more than he's defrauded. But the rich young man, Jesus asks him to give everything. He says, give it all away. You have to give it all away. Why did he do that? Well, he must have seen into the heart, right? He saw into the heart of that rich young man, and he knew the attachment of that man to his money, wealth, and possessions. He knew he had to give that away to have that transformation of the heart. And turning over the tables, the passion of Jesus in the temple was an act of anger, but it was an act of the heart against injustice over finance, about the way people have been defrauded. All of these things on here, it's about a shift from the law to love. Like so many things with Jesus, you've been told this, you've been told to follow this pattern and do this thing, but actually this is about a transformation of the heart. Money and finance is absolutely no different. There is no set law of how much you should give or how you should give exactly. This is about a transformation of the heart, moving into that space of generosity. And asking that question, what does your relationship with money say about your walk with Jesus? It's just something for us to take and reflect on. I want to talk a little bit now about the landscape of debt and poverty today. It's probably a little bit something that's on everybody's minds. All we have to do is turn on the telly and you can see about the cost of living increases. We know that's going to be exacerbated with this, the war in Iran. We can see prices going up all the time. There were statistics released only today, the government's own statistics, saying that they now say that 13.4 million people in the UK now live in relative poverty. And what that means is that these are people who are living underneath 60% of the median average income of the population. So what we're seeing is that more people are just falling below that median line of what they need to actually to be able to live a life where they're able to live within society comfortably, able to do the things that we would all expect to be able to do. But also that the inequality within the UK is growing, and it's a real crisis that we expect to get worse in the next year or two. CAP has a particular heart around debt, and that is the ministry of CAP is to provide free debt advice to people in the UK. And you can see here some of the current statistics around debt in the UK. 18%, so nearly 1 in 5 of UK adults have debt that they're struggling to repay. 7% of UK adults have borrowed money to pay for their regular food shop. 21%, so again about 1 in 5 of UK adults have a deficit budget. Now what that means is that they don't have enough money coming in to pay for the basic costs of living. If you think about the bills and food, sort of a fairly basic cost, they just, even if they go and they look at trying to cut things back, they still have to spend more than they're getting in just to be able to survive. And you may think, well, actually, this is something that applies, just to people perhaps who aren't working. But one of the big rises that we're seeing at the moment is in-work poverty. So people who are working, even full-time working, but actually find themselves in debt. So 1 in 3 UK adults working full-time say that the high costs of essentials such as food and energy has caused them a financial difficulty in the past 5 years. And again, 1 in 5 in full-time employment have debt that they're struggling to repay. And 9% of adults who are working have had to borrow money to pay for their regular food shop. So we've mentioned a little bit about the food shop, but we're moving now. So you'll notice here it says our clients. So that's what we talk about, the people that CAP works with, who are supported through local churches. Local churches partner with CAP to deliver this free debt advice. And the people we work with, our clients, work with us through a face-to-face service. And we work with some of the people who have the most, some of the most severe debt, but also some of the most challenging circumstances, because we provide a face-to-face service. I don't know if you can imagine, but somebody who's got maybe multiple challenging aspects to their life would find, for example, a fully online service just impossible to manage. Well, we have a face-to-face service, can actually sit down with people, help them work through some of those challenges. And we survey those people every year to find out what their experience of life is at the moment. So of the clients that we've surveyed, nearly 60% have had to borrow money to pay for their regular food shop. 72% went without healthy food due to its cost. This is a feature that we're seeing very much amongst our clients, is that even if they're able to afford food, the rising costs are pushing them more and more towards cheap, low nutrition kinds of foods that are more affordable, but actually aren't providing the nutritional benefits that people need. And that can be a particular problem for parents or single parents who are often skipping meals so that their children are able to eat. But what we see also here on the bottom right is the isolation that people experience in debt. And this is what we're saying about poverty being really multifaceted, and the relational aspect of debt and poverty. 85% of people are feeling isolated because they're in debt. They don't want to answer the door. They don't want to talk to friends and family. They might have borrowed money from friends and family, or they just feel so ashamed of the debt situation that they're in that they hide away. And in some cases, a CAP befriender, so somebody from the local church who's there to kind of accompany them as a friend and a spiritual support if they want that, might be the first person who's crossed their door in a very, very long time. And that can be a really big transformational moment for people. And you can see some more of these statistics here about how debt actually it's not just something that's in the back of people's minds. And if you've had some financial troubles yourself at some point, you'll know that. You will know how it keeps people awake at night and causes anxiety and stress. People not wanting to pick up the phone in case it's somebody calling asking for a payment, or not wanting to open the door in case it's a bailiff there coming to maybe try and reclaim some of their property, piling up post, hiding post for fear of what it contains. There's high levels of anxiety around debt and finance. And it can stop people just living their lives and put them into a kind of a survival mode. I'll just pop a trigger warning here because one of the frightening statistics that we've seen, and this trigger warning is around suicide, is that many people, just about half, so 49% of people who come as a client to CAP have considered or attempted suicide before reaching out to us. It's an extremely serious and life-threatening issue that we're facing. And actually, people think, and we haven't got time to go into the kind of deserving, undeserving poor kind of narrative that we see portrayed in the media, but actually overspending accounts for 3% of the reasons that we need to help people with their debts. But one of the largest reasons, or the largest reason, is people who are struggling with mental health breakdowns. And often other health breakdowns, bereavements, the kind of things that actually just kick people into a different life situation where they simply can't cope anymore. I'm going to just skip past this for the moment, but you can see here some of the reasons that people have borrowed money, the kind of urgent day-to-day living costs that people have been forced to borrow for. I'm going to ask that we're just going to play a video now, and it's from a client. It's a story of a client called Stevie. I can't remember the name of the Matt. If you should be able to press the CC button to get the captions. If you look to the right of the volume button, because the gentleman has a very strong Scottish accent, and it's not always. It might help just to have those captions on. There is a trigger warning at the beginning of this, because this gentleman, was at the point of considering suicide when he came to help to speak to Cap. There's no detail on any of that at all. It's just that's just where he got to. So I just want to offer that warning, and we'll watch this video, and then I will just share a bit about the ministry of Christians Against Poverty and how we're stepping in and helping people.
Contains content about suicide.
I was like, I've only left with £10 here, how can I survive on this? And it was hard, even when you were in debt. It was hard, so hard. There was vet bills, there was rent for the house, credit cards, shopping. It just started spiraling out of control. I could not control my debts. I just kept on adding to it and adding to it every month, getting these letters through the door, all unread. And I was like, oh no, help. I can't do this anymore. They're demanding money off me all the time. I just could not afford to pay them anymore. My body was getting tighter and tighter, and my head was about to explode because of all these debt letters. I was like, I can't do this. I was £4,500 in debt. I was like, you know what, suicide's going to be the way forward. That debt can just lie there. I don't care about it anymore. I just want to get suicide, and that's it. Like, you know what? Nah, that's enough. I'm just going to go.
%49% of our clients have considered or attempted suicide due to debt.
The support worker who came out to me, they said, look, we've got the best organisation that can help you. And they said CAP, and I just didn't know there was a thing out there that CAP could help me. Within 5 minutes of them being in the house, it was like I'd known them for years, and I just felt safe with them. And I was like, you know what, I feel safe here. I could talk to them. I mean, when you start off in debt, you're in the darkness. But Simon and Colin actually helped me through to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Then after that, everything started falling into place. And I got that letter saying, congratulations, you're debt free. I went, wow, I can actually afford to get things without putting myself into debt. It's absolutely brilliant. Simon had came and goes, Stevie goes, I've got a men's group on a Thursday night. I goes, yeah, I'll come along for the first night. After that first group, I was like, wow, this is great. I've met a lot of good friends there, really supportive people as well. There was a group that I really liked that I got involved with in Freedom in Christ, and I think it was the 6th session in, and I said to someone, I feel that I'm ready to give my life to Jesus again. I was baptised, and since then I've been at the church ever since then. CAP's changed my life completely. So now I'm living life to the full now. Looking back at it now, I'm like, it's not worth it. Suicide's not worth it. There's always help out there for people.
So I hope from that you start to see some of the ministry of what Christians Against Poverty does. So Christians Against Poverty is 30 years old, and it is a movement, it is a church-based movement. It works only through churches and through local Christians, supported by an expert debt advice hub in Bradford. And it supports local debt centres to give free debt advice to some of the most vulnerable people most vulnerable to debt in the UK, people who could not access or use online, telephone or other services, but also those people who find themselves most likely to be struggling with mental health, maybe to have a lower kind of education level, to be on low paid incomes, to have those kind of multiple points of challenge that they're experiencing. These are the clients that CAP feels called by God to work for and support, and that we partner with churches to do that. And that debt advice is then provided through the local church, and people, there's not only people to provide that debt advice, but also people to provide community and support. So there will be always a befriender journeying along with a client, helping them to get to that point of debt free. And so you notice there that Stevie's story was not just a story about, oh, I was in debt and then I was given debt support and then I was debt free. Actually, he was invited to be, having been isolated and alone and feeling that there was no way out, he was invited to be part of a warm Christian community. And he decided in the end that he wanted to be baptized and to give his life to Jesus, which was an amazing thing. So we have 300 churches, about 3,000 local church-based volunteers, and about 30,000 supporters who give to us monthly or on a one-off basis, and who also pray and take advocacy actions, all working together to transform lives through the church and to end UK poverty. But actually, as I've said, it's more than just debt advice. Christians Against Poverty also runs a set of job clubs, again through local churches, helping people who've been out of work for a long time to come back into work. It runs another course called a life skills course, which is sort of budgeting and life support, financial life support for people who are in that vulnerable situation, perhaps not in debt, but need help to manage their finances better in a broader sense. We have a money coaching course, which some of you might have seen in some places, runs in local churches. It can be for anyone, advice on how to do budgeting and finance in a better way. And we also provide emergency aid to households who might find themselves suddenly without food. They can't top up the energy meter. Through our debt advice service, we can provide emergency top up. And we did that for 638 households last year. And in 2024, I should have the number for 2025. I don't know why that's not there. But in 2024, 2,436 people became debt free through the ministry and of local churches in the UK partnering with CAP. So what about you? Well, we'll see. I'm really happy to answer questions. The first thing I wanted to say is, if you find yourself in a situation where you are in debt, maybe that's why you've seen it and you've come today, there is no shame. Please call our free helpline or go to the website. You can put in the postcode. But also, if you have friends and family, or you can order some cards for your church to put them up there, sort of business cards or things, or have a poster up, because it's not just something that happens outside the church, but you might also have a food bank, or you might have other groups or things. But debt is something that happens inside the church as well. So to have that number available so that people can call, or they can check on the website and see if we have a debt centre or debt service within reach of them, that is something that you can do. If you're interested in your own budgeting skills, you want to improve the way that you budget and do your finances, there's our money coaching course, which can be run in churches, can be accessed online. Again, you can go and look on the website. I'm going to give some details to Olive to send round. Maybe you want to mobilize your church. Maybe actually this has inspired you, that you want your church, you think your church could do more to respond to debt and poverty in your own community. Again, you can get in touch with us and we can have a chat about how your church could respond. And that might be opening a debt centre, or it might be having a CAP Sunday service, which are the worship resources that we have every year to help the church, to help churches to reflect on debt and poverty in the UK, and how they can respond. Or maybe you would like to support CAP yourself. It's easy enough to make a donation through the website if you wanted to do that. But the thing I'd like to encourage you, and I'll send out afterwards, is we have a prayer journal. I'd say it's very good, but I write it myself, so that might make me sound a bit vain. But we have a prayer and reflection journal, so it's not just day pray for CAPS this, pray for CAPS that. It's saying, things like, what community centres can you be praying for locally? Thinking about the people who live on your street, on your road, helping with reflections from scripture. It's quite broad base, and a way of touching base with CAP and just finding out a little bit more. Or maybe the challenge for you is really around your own personal discipleship journey. Maybe you can hear the voice of Jesus saying, I want you to move more in that stewardship direction, living out of grace and abundance and thanksgiving. And that's the challenge to take away. And that's any one of those, that's fine with me. And I just hope that some of what I've shared has been interesting and informative and touched you in some way. That would be a really good thing for me. That's what I've prepared, Olive. So I'll let you open up and see what comes out.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think it's opened, well, at least for me, opened up in me what poverty is. We tend to think poverty is when I can't afford to buy something. And I think that's the entitlement, the I want this and therefore I don't have enough money to buy. And a lot of the times it's luxury. Yes, there are people, I think, who are, like you said in your figures, that are going through a point where they lack in the basics. But thank you for opening that up for us. It's opened up that poverty isn't just a lack of numbers in a bank account. It's a lack of breath and peace. It's a lack of freedom. I think you answered one of the first questions I was going to ask, which is how we can take part. And I think you've given us several options, how we as an organization and also within our individual circuits can take part. I'm hoping you can give us some of that information so we can circulate that. And I think people will be interested in that.
I can definitely pass that on. But what I would also say is, I'm here representing CAP, but I believe CAP is a brilliant ministry to support, and I'm really proud to work for CAP. But I was also proud when I worked for Christian Aid and the Tear Fund and many other organisations. So I wouldn't for a minute suggest that the only response to this is to go and support CAP. I would love it. I would love it if you were interested in finding out more about CAP. But I think, our response is based on what God's calling us to do locally and how God's calling us to respond. And if you are involved in those ministries, then that's a brilliant response to the poverty that we're seeing as well.
Yeah. I'm not sure, sisters, if there's anyone who's got a question, a comment. Please go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated the clarity with which you presented that. And I look forward to the fact that we can look at those slides again, I hope. I would be interested in your answers to the dilemma between the fact that we need to stand on our own 2 feet and to encourage people to make a go of it, to stand on their own 2 feet, compared with the fact of the inevitable dependence. Now, this could be, parent-child relationship that then has to develop, or just in society, how much do we go alone? How much do we say, no, I'm not independent, I can't manage this, and I need help? What are your thoughts?
I think that's a really difficult question.
Good.
And that's probably why people don't come up with particularly conclusive answers to it. Can I tell you a story? And by way of, I don't know how much it will give you an answer, but When I was young, I was 17, no, 18. I finished I did my GCSEs, and then I went and did my A levels at a sixth form college not too far away. And then when I finished that, I took a gap year, and for my gap year, I went back to the high school that I'd done my GCSEs in, and I worked there as a learning support assistant, because at that point they'd let anybody be a learning support assistant. I think you have to do a lot of training now, but at that point I could just go into the school and be a learning support assistant. Now, I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but I was an academic high flyer. So when I was at that school, I was in all the top sets for everything. I had parents that wanted me to learn, and they helped me to learn. And then when I went back into the school, because I was a learning support assistant, I was in all the bottom sets. And it was like I was in a different school. I was in a different school. Even the kids who were in that class who wanted to learn couldn't learn. Now, I say that because it's probably the most dramatic expression to me of the different worlds that we live in. Like, we might feel like, and I think this is where I struggle sometimes when I hear, well, everybody has that opportunity. No, they don't, because we don't live in the same worlds. You know, I live in a world where I was born to some lovely boomer parents who helped me buy my house when I was quite young, got me in a nice financial position, encouraged me in education, encouraged me, helped me save, supported me. And without drawing every, you know, we can't draw every single contrast, and we want to empower people to be able to make positive changes in their lives, but to suggest that we all live within those same opportunities, I think, in my experience, is just patently false. And we have to dig underneath why that system and that experience is so unjust for some people. And that kind of comes alongside it, which is why, you know, CAP has a policy and advocacy team. We try and influence government policy and things that happen, because it is not fair for everyone. And from a theological perspective, some people are brought up without that sense of self-worth, and without that love and support that so many of us experience. And I think as Christians, that has to guide our response, but it should never be about rescuing people and saving them, but actually about supporting people, as you say, to be able to stand on their feet, because they have the knowledge and the information and the self-worth, but also there are systems that allow them to be able to overcome whatever disadvantages might have been thrown their way. Does that give some kind of answer to your question?
I think you made some very valid points there. Yes, the solidarity of being with people and letting them know that your relationship with them and vice versa is not dependent on what they have or don't have, and entirely. It's on another basis altogether. Is always worth affirming to people, and so on. It's just it is an incredibly difficult topic. And I'm really glad this is one of the topics that we're looking at in the series that we're doing at the moment. Thank you, Olive. And hitting the nail on the head, well and truly. Thank you.
Yeah. It is a difficult topic, and I think one of the difficult things that you do mention, Sally, is going into the church and encouraging people to give. And you were talking about how the cost of living has gone up, and we forget that the church itself, the buildings, are a cost center. And so when our income is pinched at home and is reduced, are we reducing our giving, or are we maintaining our giving, but the costs are still going up? And how do you then encourage people to up their giving? It's a very difficult conversation to have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the word fundraiser in my title, but it's very much a part of my brief at CAP. You know, we have 26,500 monthly donors, but we also have 4,000 or 5,000 people who are giving one-off gifts as well as our monthly givers also giving one-off gifts. And that, I think, a celebration point for us is that Christian giving is the most stable giving group and loyal giving group of any demographic in the UK. Christians continue to give when others don't give. And I think that is what I try and remember in my fundraising. And it was the same when we were talking to churches, is that as Christians, we believe that giving is good for us, right? When we speak to people about giving, we're offering them to do something that is good for them, because they get to be part of that mission and ministry, but it's also part of their discipleship. The joy of giving, God loves a cheerful giver. The joy of giving is something that we want to invite people into. So when I've worked with churches, I always, when they need to speak to their congregations about giving, they always used to come to me and go, "Oh God, we've got to do Stewardship Sunday and I don't want to do it. I hate it." I would just say to them, "What are you most excited about the ministry of your church in the next 2-3 years? What are you going to do that's going to make a difference?" That's how you talk to people about giving, because it's about the heart. You know, if you want to move people out of debt, or you want to make your facilities disabled friendly so that you can provide a full welcome to people, or you want whatever it is you want to do, or that God is leading you to do, that's why you fundraise. You know, not for boilers and light bulbs. The boilers and light bulbs are for a purpose, right? And that's where we get it all wrong in church giving, because we give people boilers and light bulbs, and we don't talk about the difference that giving is going to make, and how it's going to transform lives, and how things are going to be different. And I love doing that. I really love fundraising and giving. It's so exciting when people get it and they're able to give something that really matters.
Well, thank you, Sally. Any other questions or comments? Please go ahead, Maggie.
I think one of the problems is that poverty in church can be hidden.
Mm.
We don't know what's going on. When my husband was in ministry, we were in an area that was, one side was quite affluent and the other side not so much. And I got involved with the Sunday school, and it became very obvious that some of the children were coming to Sunday school hungry.
Mm.
And so, it's only a small thing, but we incorporated breakfast into Sunday school to make sure that
I'm sure it wasn't a small thing for them.
I mean, it was a bit of a challenge sometimes. We had Jesus' tomb was a piece of pita bread with things like that. We tried to sort of get it in with so it wasn't obvious that we were feeding them, if you know what I mean. We were making it part of the story, but looking round, it didn't take long to work out from our point of view, because obviously both been experienced in church, that there were those there who were quietly suffering, if you like, and so we tried to look at that, and in good Methodist tradition, plenty of food.
Yeah, I think that's true. And as I say, I'm sure that meeting of that need actually wasn't a small thing for them, and in very biblical, in that we always see Jesus meeting people's physical needs, understanding that those physical needs are an impairment, them being able to live life in all its fullness. And actually it's very hard to hear the saving message of Jesus when you can't feed your family, or you have a chronic medical condition, or you're in that kind of need. It's very hard. And Jesus met those physical needs. And that, I think that's a good model to follow. But also, it's also invisible where you're in maybe even people who might appear more affluent, sometimes there's a house of cards that can quite quickly tumble down. Somebody's business collapses, or a loan is taken out for something that felt very sensible and then it doesn't work out, or an asset is lost. And there the shame can be very extreme.
We did have an elderly couple who on the surface were quite affluent, but they lived in a big house and all the rest of it, but found that they were living on lettuce soup and things like that because they hadn't actually got the money available. They'd got the house, they got the home, but they hadn't got the income to help them survive. So, to say, it is all hidden.
I think naming it, and then from what I've understood from Olive, that's kind of the name of the series, right? And I'm sorry I missed the one on menopause, because actually I've just started my perimenopause, and one of the things that I'm talking about it very openly with lots of people, because when you talk about it, it takes away the shame, and you create an environment where other people can say, actually, yeah, me too. Me too. And I have found that, and it's been really liberating, rather than trying to hide or be embarrassed about some of the things that are changing that I find difficult. The same is true of finance. We create an environment where we do talk about it, and spaces where people can be honest about their struggles, what they know, what they don't know, what they have, what they don't know have, where they're struggling, and express vulnerability as Christians, giving other people safe spaces to do the same. Because where we stay quiet, we create an assumption of, well, this doesn't happen here in church.
Yeah, that's true.
This isn't a place where this is talked about.
Can we hear from Pennies as well?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm really sorry I can't put on my camera. I woke up late from a night shift, so I didn't get time to get myself ready. Thank you very much for the presentation. I joined a bit late, but one area that I think as a church, we are doing a great job, but sometimes we are reactive. At the moment, I think if we are part of the churches, we're getting new people coming in due to different circumstances. We've got migrants coming in. And in this country, one of the things that is very easy is to get yourself into debt. And instead of waiting until people are trapped in that situation, do we try and think of programs where we can actually give the knowledge, the information before someone sinks deep? I think it's an important aspect that we really need to think of, and this can be done through identifying people that are coming in and finding a way. Obviously, like we're saying, we don't want to bombard people with information, but I feel it's something that we really need to look at, because very soon we will have those challenges where people who are coming in, they're finding themselves trapped in this situation that we are talking about. Thank you.
I've just shared in the meeting chat. So one of the things CAP does is, it used to be called CAP Money. Some of you might know as CAP Money. It's now called Money Coaching, but it is a free course that churches can run, and there's quite a reasonable. It doesn't cost much to access the training. I think it's just a couple of £100. It's not. It's very easy for a church to be able to do, and it gives you all the resources to run a money coaching course, which is all around sort of budgeting and managing your finances. And so if you had people that you thought were vulnerable, you felt that was a ministry that you wanted to do, that it's a relatively easy one to be able to do and to deliver. And again, Olive can share the link afterwards for that course. I see your point is specifically maybe for people who are new to the UK, and you'd have to have a look and see if you thought whether that fitted the bill. But that is a resource that's available from CAP.
Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you, Betsy. And thank you to all of the sisters who came through. I'll ask, I know I can see Sharon's hand coming up. We're past our time, but I'll allow for Sharon to speak before we close. Please go ahead, Sharon, and then we can...
It's not quite a question, more a case of, in our church, to get the information available to people, especially those from the migrant communities who are coming through. They don't want to be seen going through leaflets or that sort of thing. We just have an information board with the QR codes. They've all got phones. They can photograph the board. They can look for it themselves and go in that way. It's a little more discreet, and that way they access information.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. And Julia, I will take you as the last speaker. We've kept Sally on. We did say we'd have her until 8:30.
My kids are delighted because they just get to keep watching Bluey till I finish. So they're going to be like, this is going to be like Christmas Day for them.
Please go ahead, Julia. You're on mute.
Can I just say, my husband used to work for Citizens Advice as a volunteer. He's not here tonight, unfortunately. And so one of the things I wanted to ask was, can we watch Sally's talk again when he's here? Is there a possibility of that, or shall I just relay it to him?
Yes, he can. All of our webinars are uploaded onto the Methodist Women in Britain website.
Right.
So
great.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes, I was going to...
Because he was a volunteer when he retired. He was a volunteer with Citizens Advice, where we used to live in Lincolnshire, and it was great until COVID, and then they had to go online, and he was despairing really, because obviously, as you say with CAP, a lot of the people have mental health problems, haven't got the confidence for phone calls, for online, haven't got the computer skills, haven't got the maybe educational ability, haven't got the finances for a computer. And he used to say to me about a man who used to come in before COVID, where he would come in with a whole carrier bag of paperwork that had come through the door, and he obviously couldn't, deal with it all, and they'd just go through it. And after COVID, well, I mean, CAB is now a government organisation, isn't it? They decided in their wisdom to carry on online or on the phone. And he despaired. He just despaired about it and sort of railed against it, because he said most of the people I see need to be face to face.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And in the end, he just gave up. He just said, I can't do this anymore. We've since moved to North Yorkshire, partly because of my health, but listening to CAP, I just think the fact that it's face to face, that's fantastic. And I've been writing things down because I'm thinking this is something he could maybe get involved in.
I'm sure if you have, for you, I'm happy to pass my email address over to you. That either if there's a local debt centre that might need volunteers, or if it's something that you might want to discern within your own church, then
I think within the church here, because the minister, he's actually supernumerary, and he works for nothing because he just loves what he's doing. He's fabulous, and I think he'd be very open to things like this.
That's fine. I don't know if Olive, you're able to pass, if you have Julia's email address, I'm happy for you to pass that over to.
Brilliant. I'm not sure we've got your email address, Julia, but maybe if you send it through to our communications email.
Yeah.
Do you have
okay.
that? Communications
I mean, I don't mind putting it in the chat. I mean, everybody.
I've actually put my email address here. If you can quickly jot it. I'm not
Brilliant. I think if you
You put it in the
email
chat.
address, yeah. I think if there's anybody who would like to get Sally's email address, and I'm glad that we've had this kind of interest in your email address, Sally, because the reason
Thank
we
you.
hold these is so that we can continue to discuss the topics and grow from the topics. And our hope is that it doesn't end when this webinar ends, and that there's further discussion back in our communities, back in our churches. I'd really be interested in taking part in running or participating in the money coaching, because I think it might benefit me personally. If it doesn't benefit me, at least we'll understand how to discuss giving. But thank you very much, Sally. Thank you very much for opening a can of worms for us. Because I think those are some of the things. And I think the other word you mentioned is fundraising, where we find it very difficult to fundraise within churches. We've sold enough cakes, we've sold enough plants in markets and things. And I think we just need to find ways of being able to speak about our discipleship and not just the bills that we have as a church. So thank you very much for coming on board. We hope we can invite you again. We've got Swanik coming up on the 10th to the 12th. We're hoping you're coming, Sally, to our Swanik in Derby, our conference.
Yeah, I'll check that with me afterwards.
All right, thank you very much. But we've got, if you haven't got Sally's email address, please email us on communications.mwib@gmail.com and we can provide you the details. But otherwise, this webinar will be up and rolling on our website tomorrow evening. I'm putting Matt on the line here, but I think tomorrow evening. Yes, he says correct. Tomorrow evening, the website will be back on. So if there's anything that you need to rewatch, relook at, get more information, by all means. Before we go, just a few reminders. Save the date for our next webinar. We're taking a break in April so we can all go to Easter. But on the 28th of May, we will be talking about immigration. And I can see there were a couple of spirit-led sisters who had already started to speak about immigration. So on the 28th of May, we'll be meeting for immigration. Please keep talking about these conversations. Keep encouraging people to open up. And that's the reason we have the webinars, to talk about it. Sally, if you want to read through or listen through to the menopause webinar, it's on our website as well. So please feel free. And there's a lot of material and context. But thank you very much. God bless you and continue to be a supportive community. Sorry it ran longer, and I think these are running much longer because we've got more to talk about now, but sorry for that. But God bless you and have a good night. See you next time.
God bless. Bye.